Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones. And we have a great show for you this week. As you know, the Ducks beat the Calgary Flames in 4 games. So they move on to the second round. They're going to take on the Edmonton Oilers. Eddie and I are going to preview that series. We're going to talk about some numbers from the regular season and the playoffs. We've got tons of fan questions, player updates as well. Some stuff going on with the goals as well. As you know, they're in the playoffs too. So we're going to cover all of that stuff. But when we did our last show, Eddie, the Ducks were up 3-0 on the Calgary Flames. They went into the 4th game, and they ended up taking them out in this one kind of early. The Ducks got 2 goals right away. Patrick Eaves, Nate Thompson. The Flames were able to get one back, but Getzlaf got an empty net goal, and the Ducks finished off the Flames on the road 3-1, which was actually the first time a game was decided by more than a goal. But another great game by the Ducks, Eddie. They get out the brooms, they sweep the Flames, and continue their streak of losing against the Ducks.
Yeah, and another game, too, where we had a disparity in penalties early on, and it got to the point where it was, in 2 games, it was 8 penalties for the against the Ducks and 0 against the Flames, and obviously it finished off with the Ducks getting 2 power plays. But I think it was a hard-fought effort. I know as fans that was frustrating, and I'm sure it was frustrating for the players. You could see it on their faces every time they took a penalty, and nothing seemed to go the other way. And I think that was a tough-fought, hard road game. I mean, it's tough. You're up 3-0. The team's desperate. You know, they've got nothing to lose now. They have to go out, and the Flames came out and they played a really strong game. And I think, kudos to the Ducks early getting on the board. Brian Elliott gifted Patrick Eaves with the first goal, and then Thompson continued his strong play and put the Ducks up 2-0. And I think that was key going into the second period. And they played a pretty strong second period too, other than obviously the power play goal. Monahan getting his 4th power play goal of the series. And I think that's the only thing that was been really poor for the Ducks in the series was the penalty kill, but we'll talk about that later. And then a really strong defensive effort in the third period. Obviously Getzlaf finishing it off with the empty net goal, and I think very key timely saves from Gibson as well. Key face-off wins from Matt and Thompson. For once, Kessler actually wasn't dominant in the face-offs in this game. He was actually only 17%. So other guys stepped up in Thompson and Vermette and won key face-offs, and they really grinded out the win here. And I think it was key that they won this in 4. We talked about it in the last podcast, for them to get rest for guys like Fowler and Vatanen and Lindholm, and even Eaves, who picked up a knock in Game 3, to get back and be 100% and ready for round 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got a lot of updates, obviously, on the players. Thompson and Lindholm got dinged up in this game a little bit towards the end, but they sound like they're going to be good to go. We've got, a lot of other player updates we'll get to. But like you mentioned, this, win in 4 games was huge because Edmonton and San Jose still had to battle it out. If you remember, they were tied 2-2. Edmonton did end up winning the final 2 and took that series 4-2, and that's obviously who the Ducks are going to play next. And it's going to start on Wednesday at Honda Center. So we're going to look at how the teams did during the regular season, and then we're going to talk about both of their first-round matchups. If you're looking at this season, the Ducks played the Oilers 5 times. They ended up winning twice in regulation. They lost 1 time in regulation and then lost 2 times in overtime. Some pretty close games there, too. The Ducks could have easily won those overtime games. If you remember, they had some chances to win and then, unfortunately, went to overtime in a couple of those games. But if we look at this, we'll break it down. We'll look at the offense, the defense, and the goaltending. Just kind of like Calgary during the regular season, some of these numbers are pretty even, Eddie. I mean, if you look at the goals per game during the season, the Ducks were at 2.68, and Edmonton was a little bit higher at 2.96. So that's where you are in the goal differential. Not too much. I mean, pretty close. You look at the team points overall, the Ducks had 105, Edmonton had 103. So, some pretty even numbers there. You look at their even strength goals per game. The Ducks had 2. Edmonton had 2.23. You look at the power play goals per game. The Ducks had 0.57, and the Oilers had 0.68. So some pretty even numbers there. Even the shots on goal per game, the Ducks averaging just under 30 and the Oilers averaging just over 31. So it's pretty even if you look at the regular season on offense, Eddie. I think Edmonton did pick it up in the last couple games. Kessler had shut down McDavid pretty good earlier in the season, and then obviously he started to score in some of these later games. So, and we'll talk about that too as being a key. But in terms of offense and looking at the regular season, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you have to give the boost to the Oilers on offense in the regular season. I mean, in some categories, like you said, they were only slightly leading shots per game, shots per goal, team shooting percentage. They were only slightly leading, but their core offense, obviously Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, they led the way, and the Oilers were just under 3 in goals per game, which was a lot higher. They ranked 8th, the Ducks ranked 18th, so there is a significant advantage there. But the key thing is to mention as well, it is the regular season, and when you look at the first round as well, and we'll talk about it in a bit, the Oilers did struggle, and only really their two big guns, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, showed up. But when looking at these regular season stats, I think you have to give an advantage to the Oilers. They have probably the better top end talent. Connor McDavid's one of the best players in the league. Leon Draisaitl has stepped up and really meshed on that line with him. So I think a slight advantage to them, obviously considering that they lead in every single of the offensive categories that we have listed here.
Yeah, I agree. During the regular season, they do have a slight edge for offense. In terms of defense, it looks like here you look at the numbers. Anaheim has a little bit of an edge here. The goals against per game, the Ducks are at 2.4. Edmonton is at 2.52. If you look at the even strength numbers, it's even lower for the Ducks. It's 1.79, and then for Edmonton, 1.94. On the power play, they're both dead even at 0.52. Shots against are almost dead even, both in 29 and change. So the numbers, again, are a little bit closer. But if you look at the defense overall, during the regular season, that is, I would give a little bit of an edge to the Ducks here, Eddie, based upon the numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit obvious. I mean, the Oilers, their only real struggle in the regular season was defense. I think a lot of their defense was around how the play of Cam Talbot and how well he played in the regular season. I mean, he had 42 wins for them in the regular season. I mean, he was a key part to their success. And the Ducks do actually lead them in almost every single defensive category we have listed here. And I think that's a testament to the Ducks' defense and obviously the play of John Gibson and at times the play of Jonathan Bernier as well. So I think it was an excellent season defensively for the Ducks. They carried that into the playoffs, maybe not at the same level, but they played decent defensively at times against Calgary. And I think if they can just step it up and get back to the way they were playing during the regular season, I think they'll have an even higher advantage over the Oilers.
And during the regular season, the other part of this too, you mentioned Bernier and Gibson is the goalie battle, which we figure will be Gibson against Talbot in this series. If you look at the numbers overall, these are again, maybe a little bit edge to the Ducks, but pretty even. The save percentage was .919 for the Ducks. For Edmonton, .914. So I mean, very very close. Goals against average, the Ducks averaged 2.37 against. Edmonton 2.49. So very, very even. Shutouts, Ducks had 8, Edmonton had 7. So maybe another slight edge to the Ducks, but as we keep saying, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tight battle, I think, in net. But I still give the edge to Gibson in the series.
Yeah, I think you look at Gibson's numbers. Obviously, he didn't play as many games. So injuries factor into that, and the fact that the Ducks actually have a capable backup goaltender in Jonathan Bernier, that also factors into it as well. But I think when you just look at the two goalies in Gibson and Talbot, I think there's a slight edge for Gibson. And I know that probably sounds a little bit biased. Talbot played great this season. He won 42 games for the Oilers. But I think you got to look at the specific numbers, obviously, save percentage, goals against average, the amount of shutouts that each goaltender had. And I think that Gibson does have a slight advantage, and maybe he doesn't have as much playing time, but I think you look at those categories and he does. And then you also have to look at the goaltender depth as well. And I think if at any time either one of the goaltenders struggle and you have to go to the backup, the Ducks have a significant advantage there, as Jonathan Bernier is a lot more experienced and arguably a better backup goaltender than Laurent Brossoit that Edmonton has. So I think that's also an advantage for the Ducks. But I think, when we're comparing starters, as of game one, I think the Ducks definitely have an advantage with John Gibson between the pipes.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. If you look at the two series now, the Ducks series against Calgary and then Edmonton against San Jose, there's some interesting numbers here and some keys to this matchup that we're going to go over. One of the biggest things, it was kind of, I guess, a surprise maybe to some people, is that Edmonton struggled offensively in this series against San Jose. They only averaged 2 goals per game. And if you look at that series, I mean, they actually played well in 5 of the games. Talbot had 2 shutouts. Obviously, San Jose blew them out in that one crazy game, 7-0. But outside of that, they've only scored 2 goals per game. They gave up 2.3 against, which again, that's probably inflated from that one blowout game. But it's kind of interesting because if you look at the Ducks numbers, Eddie, the Ducks averaged 3.5 goals a game and gave up 2.5. So it's going to be interesting. We kind of thought maybe, Edmonton would have a higher power offense in the playoffs, but right now it looks like the Ducks are the team that's been scoring more goals, based upon the first round series.
Yeah, and like you said, it is a little bit interesting to see that flip where the Ducks' offense struggled in the regular season and defense was key to success, and it was the opposite for the Oilers, and now they've both switched around. And like you said, I think the goals against per game for the Oilers, they're probably ranked a little bit higher if they don't lose that game 7-0. So it's probably higher than 8th, which is key for them. That's a real success for them to have, especially with the blue line that they have, and obviously with Cam Talbot and the struggles that they had in the regular season. They still did finish 8th, but I think it's important that for them that they have that going. But yeah, you look at the offense, and that's something you thought that they would have going in this series, and really the only two guys who stepped up for them were Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. McDavid had 2 goals, 2 assists, and 4 points. Draisaitl had 3 points, and the only other forward for them who had over 3 points was Mark Letetsu. So they struggled offensively. They struggled to get some depth scoring. They still did end up winning this game. They had some key victories. The 16-save shutout for Talbot and then the 23-save shutout for Talbot back-to-back were really important moments of this series for them. But I think all in all, it comes down to San Jose's struggle to generate any offense. And other than the game that they won 7-0, the Sharks didn't really get much going. And I don't know if that's credit to the Oilers' defense or just the Sharks' inability to get any offense going. And I think that's something the Ducks are going to have to focus on in this series, is really figuring out if it was due to the Oilers' defense that they were able to shut out the Sharks in 2 games and really close out this series, or if it was due to the Sharks' inability to score goals.
No, I think those are both important things to look at. I think the injury thing is to check out too. I mean, obviously, a lot of players are injured this time during the year. We've talked about it. Players are banged up. They have bruises and nicks and scratches and all that. And obviously, some of the Ducks do, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But Thornton played in this series. It came out today with torn MCL and ACL. So that affected the offense. Not to take away from Talbot, 16 save shutout. I mean, it's good, but it's 16 saves. I mean, it's not a lot. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's, like you said, the defense helping out, or if it's the Sharks not being 100% healthy, offensively in this series. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Ducks offense matches up against the Edmonton defense in this series. I think that's going to be a key. If the Ducks can keep scoring, 3+ goals a game, then I think they're going to be in a good shape, to take this series, Eddie. I mean, I don't think they're going to take it in 4 games, but they'll definitely be in a good shape to win it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it comes down to that if they're going to eventually pull this series. Everything combined. I mean, the ability to shut down McDavid, the Ducks need to get their penalty kill going, offense has to keep firing like it has, depth scoring, and then obviously the guys coming back from injury and Fowler and Vatanen will hopefully help boost the penalty kill from being the league worst in the first round. So I think all those things come together. It's going to be an important game. Obviously, home ice is huge. The way the Ducks played in the first round and the way the Ducks played at home in the regular season is going to be important. The Oilers are a similar road team to Calgary, so I think it'll be interesting to see how the Ducks play in the first 2 games. Obviously, with the rest, you never know if too much rest is a good or bad thing until the Ducks first hit the ice. So I think they're going to have to get it going early, get to Talbot, get a lot of shots, get traffic in front of the net. And if they can get to him early and lower his confidence, I mean, we saw in the game that they lost 7-0. He's not always perfect. And I think consistency is key in the playoffs, and the Ducks are going to have to do that early.
I agree. And, that argument always comes up, rust versus rest, and whether or not it's a good thing or not. I know that if you followed the Ducks, some of the interviews, some of the players said it was a good thing because obviously trying to get Fowler back We talked about Lindholm and Thompson getting dinged up in Game 4, Vatanen as well. You have all these different injuries going on. So, especially in the Ducks blue line, they had talked about it being a good thing to get healthy. But like you said, Game 1, that's something to watch if the Ducks are going to come out in that same type of groove that they've been in those 4 games, or if not, that's going to be important too, especially getting that early goal in Game 1. Another thing that's kind of interesting in the series too, Eddie, is I don't really know if anybody's going to have home ice advantage in the crowd because the Oilers brought back their orange, and if you watch their games, all their fans are wearing orange too. So I don't know if that's really going to help either team. I mean, obviously it matters when it comes to the line changing and all that, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's going to be interesting since it's the painted orange versus the orange crush.
Yeah, I think maybe for sight of fans, it's going to be interesting. But obviously, when you're in Edmonton, the cheers are going to be based towards the Oilers, and when you're in Anaheim, the cheers are going to be based towards the Ducks. So I don't think it matters as much there. It'll be interesting to see, though, obviously, with the Oilers going with the orange. And the Ducks also having orange. I wonder if it's the first time that really 2 teams have met where they're kind of going with the same theme throughout the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be a little bit of a funny thing to see, especially if you see any Ducks fans in Edmonton wearing orange or any Oilers fans in Anaheim wearing orange.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the funny thing is the name Orange Crush because it's been out there. It's not really original, but it's going to be interesting to see how each team responds to that as well. But I think another key that we're going to talk about is the power play as well. As the Ducks power play is 23.1% against the Oilers 80.5%. So I think that's another key. Eddie is going to be the power play against the penalty kill and vice versa. As the Edmonton power play has struggled too in the first round.
Yeah, the Oilers' special teams weren't great in the first round. They were actually their power play was one of the best in the NHL in the regular season, and I'm not sure if that's testament to the Sharks. Their penalty kill was awful, I believe I believe the penalty kill was awful during the regular season, and they finally got things going in this series. But a lot of the Oilers' offense drives through Connor McDavid and through Leon Draisaitl in their first power play unit, and if they can't get things going, then their power play is going to struggle, and that's the job's going to fall on Ryan Kessler and Antoine Vermette and Logan Shaw and Wagner and the guys on the penalty kill, especially the defense too, if Fowler and Fontenot are back, to limit the chances for the Oilers' power play. And then you look at the Ducks power play as well. They played great during the first round. They had a lot of things going for them. Theodore was a big boost to that power play. And I think they're going to have to jump on the Oilers' poor penalty kill in the first round. And I think that's going to be important for the Ducks. I mean, are we going to see another situation where maybe the Ducks go to Edmonton and they don't get a lot of power play opportunities like we saw in Calgary? That hopefully doesn't happen. I don't think I could handle having something like that happen again with 8 straight penalties and 0 for the Ducks. But I don't think we'll see something like that happen again. At least I hope not. And the Ducks are going to have to take advantage of their power play opportunities and limit, get better defensively and limit their discipline and get better discipline in this second round. They were awful in the first round. A lot of bad penalties that could have been avoided. And Calgary made them pay. And you can't do that 2 rounds, especially against this team when you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on that power play unit.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's one key for the Ducks to look at. They got to be more disciplined and they got to be better on the penalty kill. Obviously, not having Fowler and then Vatanen for a majority of these games as well hurt them. I think it was interesting. We had a fan question too from Kyle about that. He said, our power plays were non-existent during the Calgary series, and like you mentioned, will we get shafted in Edmonton? I hope not, because Game 3 the Ducks had 0 power plays. If you remember, there was 1 penalty killed on Calgary, but it was an evened up situation. Then the Ducks did get 2 power plays in Game 4, which helped out. But I hope they get more power plays. I mean, Game 3 was particularly frustrating the way it went, and for the Ducks to basically beat the refs. Beat Calgary and come back, being down 4-1, I think put the Ducks over in order to, go into Game 4 with the momentum and win that one. I hope they don't get in that kind of situation, Eddie, especially going into Edmonton, but they definitely have to shore up the penalty kill. It's 62.5%. I mean, it's tough. I mean, the Ducks, the penalty kill struggled, but to give them a little bit of credit too. I mean, when you're killing off so many power plays in a row, it's tough. I mean, when you're out there like in Game 3 and you're trying to kill 3 or 4 off in a row, it's going to be difficult to, withstand all those. Not saying that, making excuses for them, but you're a little bit shorthanded on the blue line. You're constantly on the defense instead of attacking. It's going to wear down any team. Hopefully the Ducks do get, the penalty kill better. Like you talked about, the power play for Edmonton was terrible at just 12.5%. So that's another thing to watch. It's going to be, basically each team's power play versus the penalty kill. And it's going to be huge, I think, in this series, Eddie, with, obviously the Ducks power play doing well against the Edmonton penalty kill doing well, and then obviously vice versa with the other two not doing as well.
Yeah, and I think in the first round, too, you have to give credit to the Calgary Flames power play. I mean, they came into the playoffs with a hot power play, and they continued to do that in the first round. And I mean, it was difficult for the Ducks to really control them. Monahan especially, the positions he was getting himself in, he deserved those goals. And the way the Flames are moving the puck on that power play, I don't know if having Vaughn or Fowler really would have changed the situation that the Ducks penalty kill was in during that series. I think having the back will obviously help and make them more mobile on the blue line and give an opportunity to have some better players out there. But you run into a hot power play and sometimes there's not much you can do. And obviously they can get better and they should be getting better in the second round. But you won't have to face a power play that has been on fire coming out of either round one or the regular season in the Oilers. So I think that will hopefully be an advantage for the Ducks and that they'll be able to shore up that issue from round one.
And another important part of this series, and a lot of people talk about this, we had Zach asked us too, is about Kessler against McDavid. And this is going to be, of course, huge, Eddie, in this series. I think a lot of it, you're really going to have to pay attention to the line changes. The Ducks have home ice, of course, which helps. If you remember, it doesn't really matter with the faceoffs anymore because now the faceoffs, it just matters where the puck is being dropped and which zone. But in terms of the matchups, the Ducks will have the advantage in more games than not. But I would look for Edmonton to switch the lines up quickly on these road games. But I think Carlisle will be ready, Eddie. I mean, he made some good in-game changes in the first series and basically, outcoached the Flames. So I think that's going to be definitely huge. And, whether or not the Kessler line can shut down the McDavid line is going to be, maybe one of the biggest probably focal points of this series.
Yeah, I think it is the main focal point of this series. I mean, you have to look at round one and look at the key players for the Oilers, and not a lot of guys got it done. I mean, look at Eberle; he had 1 assist. Maroon had 1 goal. Nugent Hopkins had 0 points in the 6 games that he played. Pouliot had 0 points. Those are guys in their top 6 that didn't really do great. McDavid had 4 points in those 6 games. Draisaitl had the 3 points in those 6 games as well, and that was really it for them. They got some offense from Klefbom from the blue line, and they got some offense from their third line center and Letetsu. But it's going to be important for Kessler to shut those guys down. Now, obviously, I don't expect Eberle and Lucic and Maroon and Nugent Hopkins to stay completely quiet for long, but it translates throughout the team. If you can shut down their best players and their best line, it makes a team frustrated, and I think it's going to be important. I mean, Kessler played great in the first round, limited the chances that Monahan and Goodrow had even strength, and really their only offense, at least from Monahan, came on the power play, and Goodrow was relatively quiet during that series, and I think that was a great job by that line. Cogliano had 0 points, Kessler only had 1 assist, but their main impact came defensively and stopping that line from doing anything even strength. And I think that's going to be the big key to this series as well. And really, Kessler, we'll talk about in a bit, he's a Selke finalist, and this is his role on this team, is to shut down the opposing team's best players. So I think that's probably the main key in this series, and we'll have to see if it's a possibility.
And tied into that, too, is going to be the faceoffs as well, Eddie. The Ducks were one of the better faceoff teams. They were the 3rd best team in the first round at 53.4%. And the Oilers were actually one of the worser teams at 47.2%. And obviously that factors in to this whole Kessler versus McDavid line as well, and all the other lines. I think for the Ducks, they have an advantage there, obviously down with the center depth with Getzlaf in there, Kessler, Thompson. Thompson not only been playing, decent faceoffs, but he's been playing well offensively too and defensively. So that's going to be another key to watch in this series is how the faceoffs pan out. But in looking at the overall picture and how it's going to go, I don't think this is going to be a 4-game series, that's for sure. I still think the Ducks will pull this one out, Eddie. Obviously some factors are going to have to be determined the next day or two as far as the defense, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I think this one will probably go about 6 games, Eddie, and I think the Ducks will pull this one out in 6.
Yeah, and I think it's respecting the speed of this team as well, and especially the speed and skill of that first line. That's going to be important for the Ducks to really get a handle on that. And I think they did a decent job against the Flames, who are by no means a slow team when you've got guys like Johnny Gaudreau and Sam Bennett and Sean Monahan on your team. I mean, they did a good job at times of handling the speed of the Flames. And I think that if they can do that against this team, the Flames, the Oilers, it's hard to say they're a faster team because they do have guys like Lucic and Maroon, but when you have Connor McDavid on your team and he's arguably the fastest guy in the NHL, you still have to mention that on this team. And I think the blue line for the Oilers as well, it's been good, but when you compare it to the Flames, I don't think it is as good. And it's tough to say the Ducks are going to win this in 4. I don't want to. I don't think they will. Like you said, I think it's going to be a closer series. The Oilers have shown that they can win close games against the Sharks, who are a very experienced team. But if I had to pick, I'd probably pick 6 or 7 games. And we didn't see any 7-game series in round 1, and it only gets tighter the farther you go in the playoffs. So if this goes 6 or 7, I don't think anybody would be surprised.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see either team winning this in 4 or 5 games. I think we're going to have a decent series on hand, and all the things that we talked about are going to be the factors of how it's going to go. I think the biggest thing for the Ducks is going to be the health of the blue line. And we got a lot of updates on all kinds of players and different things that have gone on really in the last 48 hours, Eddie, with the defense. We found out that Fowler has been back skating with the team, which has been good news. He's done that the last couple of days. It's not confirmed that he'll be in game 1, but it's a good sign that he could be ready to go. I know Carlisle talked about the blue line, talked about having everybody ready to go, which we'll have to see. Vatanen was back on ice as well, skating. We know Lindholm had sat out a couple days, so we'll have to monitor his status. But it's just kind of interesting. It creates a problem. If all these guys are ready to go, Fowler, Vatanen, Lindholm, the Ducks are going to have to figure out what to do, or, Carlisle's going to have to figure out what to do, because you have Theodore, who played outstanding in the first round, and you have Montour too. So you look at this, potentially having 8 defensemen ready to go for game 1, and you're only going to be able to pick 6. The obvious choice is Holzer would be out, but then after that, if you had Fowler and Vatanen, Lindholm all good to go, it's probably going to come down to Theodore or Montour, and I would think it would be Montour just because Theodore's played better. But, I mean, it's still not an easy decision who the Ducks are going to put in there as their top 6 if they're all healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say Montour goes out easily and you just slot Fowler in because he hasn't played well. I mean, Montour had an assist, +3, was great on the power for the Ducks. Really looked like he belonged out there in the 4 games that they played in round 1. But when you look at a team healthy with Fowler, you've got Vatanen, who, if he's healthy, he'll be in the lineup. If Lindholm's healthy, he's in the lineup. Bieksa is in the lineup. Manson's in the lineup. And then you come down to, like you said, Theodore and Montour. And how do you take Shea Theodore out of the lineup the way he played in round 1? 5 points, a +3. The Ducks, definitely the Ducks' best defenseman in the first round, and arguably one of their best players. I mean, he was tied in points with Getzlaf and Raquel with 5. So you really can't take him out of the lineup. And I think you also have to look at the fact that most teams love to have 3 righties and 3 lefties in the lineup. And when you take out Montour, you've got, on the left side, you've got Lindholm, Theodore, and Fowler. On the right, you've got Manson, Vatanen, and Bieksa. And I think that's the most likely option. But, we'll have to see. From what we heard at practice today, everybody's still there. The only one who wasn't there today was Lindholm. But everybody's still practicing, everybody's still ready to go, and I think it probably comes down to a day before the game and when they decide who's in and who's out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if Fowler, Vatanen, or Lindholm, one of them are out, then I don't think it's going to be a difficult decision. You'd have Theodore and Montour both in there. So we'll just have to see what happens, obviously, in the next day or so leading up to game 1. But that's kind of a breakdown of what you got. And, we also have news on Simon Despres as well. We haven't heard a whole lot about him all season. If you remember, he only played in game 1 of the regular season against Dallas. On the NHL media site, They said that Simon Despres was taken off the injured reserve, which is a shock. We kind of didn't really expect much and didn't hear anything. But what I'm hearing from a couple of my buddies that go to practice and talk to the players and whatnot is that he's still not going to be back this season. He's going to be gearing up for next season, which is still a good sign, Eddie, because throughout the season there was a lot of talk about he was going to be done. We weren't going to see him anymore. And basically he was going to be out of it because of all the concussion problems and the symptoms and whatnot. So we won't see him, most likely won't see him in the playoffs, pretty sure. But if he's able to get healthy and come back next season, that's just going to be huge for, just him individually as well as for the team.
Yeah, I think it'll be great for him to get back and get playing. Obviously, like you said, it's important for the team that he gets back too. He's a key part to this team when he's healthy. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to him being able to live a healthy life after hockey. And I think, he's definitely not coming back this season. The Ducks don't need to rush him back. Even if he's close to being ready before the playoffs are over, there's no point. The Ducks are deep on defense. There's no point in bringing a guy who has a history of concussion injuries back and into the lineup. But I think it's important for him to get back. I mean, he's a great hockey player, a great guy, and for him to get back and being 100% healthy and hopefully playing in the NHL again is really important for him.
And talking about another defensive player, Stoner as well. I know people ask about him. According to RotoWire, they're saying he could be available in a couple of days for Game 1. I haven't heard anything official from the team, but on RotoWire, that's what they're saying. He's obviously been out for a while, and they've listed him as on RotoWire as having a stomach injury or an abdomen injury. So that's another one to add into the mix. I don't think it's the same position. I mean, given the other 8 defensemen, Eddie, I don't think they're going to rush Stoner back either. But, I mean, talk about the Ducks having options on the blue line. You have 8 and then possibly a 9th defenseman, ready for Game 1. So it's going to be interesting who Carlisle puts in there for Game 1 for sure, because if some of these guys are all ready to go, then some decisions are going to have to be made. But I don't expect Stoner to be in there, at least for Game 1.
No, I don't expect so either, even if he's 100% healthy. But, it's never a bad problem to have. I mean, if a guy goes down, you've got an NHL defenseman who's ready to step in and play a solid role with this team. And it's something we've talked about all this season, into last season even as well, and how deep the Ducks are on defense. And you think of some of the guys who aren't even here yet and maybe started the season with the Ducks. Definitely Jakob Larsson is one of them, who will probably be here next year. And it will be another part of this deep Ducks defense that is starting to form here. And I mean, it's just ridiculous what they've been able to do, and the guys have been able to bring in the lineup. It's never a problem to have too many guys yet you can put on your blue line. And obviously we've seen that with Fowler going down, with Vatanen going down, and being able to bring in Theodore and Montour, and the way they played in round 1 and stepped up. They're key parts in the Ducks winning that series in 4 games.
Absolutely, and that's what that's what we focused on too. Is basically the defense all coming back, getting healthy, and then seeing how it's going to wind up on the specialty teams too as well. So there's a few different things to look at. Is what's the blue line going to be made up of, and how it's going to affect the team. Not so much, I don't think, even strength, but more on the special teams. Trying to look through all the fan questions here, make sure we got everything down. I think we've covered most of it. We do have some questions about the second round. We'll go into those in a minute. We'll go with some little updates here also on the goals. If you haven't been following them, they started the playoffs, and they are going against the Ontario Reign, the only thing that Kings fans have to cheer for now. So they started their series this last week, and the Reign won the first game in overtime, 4-3. And then the Gulls came back and won the second game 5-3. So the series is tied 1-1, and they'll be playing Game 3 later this week. So you can check that action out. If you live in the Ontario area or the San Diego area, you can go to those games if for some reason you can't make it to Honda Center. But we've got that going on. But there's news with some of the other players too, Eddie. We found out that Max Jones, he suited up for warm-ups in Game 1, and then he actually played in Game 2. And we also heard that Jack Kopacka signed an entry-level deal, and he as well had been assigned to an amateur tryout to the Gulls. So a little bit of news with some of the younger guys there, Eddie, is they're getting some chances down there in San Diego.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I mean, it obviously adds to the depth that they have down there, and obviously with Andre Cassidy being down there as well, that's a key part to their team. And I think it just keeps growing. Obviously, we had earlier on in the season that Sidorov and Soy were down there playing with the team, and now having Jones and Kopaka going down there, it only helps the depth that they have, and hopefully making a long run in the Calder Cup playoffs. So I think it's key for them. And obviously, we've had a lot of questions too that I've seen on Twitter, and where's Troy Terry and where's Sam Steele? I haven't honestly heard any news on where Troy Terry is and if he's going to join the Gulls or not. Obviously, I mean, he's had a great year with winning World Junior Gold and then obviously winning the national championship with Denver. So and then obviously with Sam Steele, he's actually currently still playing with Regina in the WHL playoffs, so we won't really see him unless they get eliminated. So I just think it's great to see all these guys coming up, being able to play with the Gulls. Obviously, guys who look to have bright futures with the Ducks. So it's really great to see them playing so soon in professional hockey.
And the good thing too is in the series, like I said, they're close by, Ontario and San Diego. So if you get a chance to go, it's fun. I've been down to San Diego for a game. The crowd's into it. I warn you, there's a mix of Kings fans in there, but especially in this series. But it's fun. It's a good time. So we've got that going on as well. We posted the updates on some of the contract news on the website. And if you haven't, by the way, checked out the website, it is now in mobile format. So if you go to the Puck Network. .com/Anaheim, or you can just even type in DucksNPucks.com. It'll take you to the Ducks page. It's in a mobile format now. I know a lot of people were having issues trying to turn your phone or your iPad or whatever sideways. So you can go on there and check out everything. It's posted on there. It's in a friendly format. I guess with that, Eddie, we'll wrap up the show talking about the other series. We've got a couple, other matchups going on around the league. As we talked about in the last show, Nashville came out and destroyed Chicago. They won 4-0. And as we also talked about, Minnesota lost. So I'm not sure how they feel about Boudreaux. But the other matchup in the Western Conference is going to be Nashville against St. Louis. And I think this is going to be a good one. I'm actually going with Nashville in this one, Eddie. I think the way their defense played, especially against Chicago, I'm going to give them the edge against St. Louis. I think Minnesota just, I don't know what happened with them. I think they just struggled too much down the stretch at the end of the season. Just couldn't really put it together in the playoffs, unfortunately for Boudreaux. But I don't know if I want the Ducks to play at Nashville if they can get past Edmonton, but I think that's how I'm leaning in that series.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting too that this series really puts arguably the two best goaltenders from round one against each other. I mean, you had Pekka Rinne, who was just unbelievable in that series, and then you had Jake Allen, who really got the Blues to the second round in some of these games. The Wild had outshot the Blues tremendously in some of these games, and he was able to stand tall for them and get the win. So I think that's going to be a huge part of this series is which goalie is going to be able to stay consistent and win this series for them. And then I mean it's tough. It's a tough one. I said it in the first round that some games would go to 7, and we saw no game 7s in round 1. But I think if anyone of the games, the series in this one go to game 7, I think this has to be it. I mean, this will be an interesting series to watch. None of them really play an exciting style of hockey. Nashville likes to hold on to the puck, one of the best possession teams in the NHL, and the Blues don't play an exciting style of hockey either. But I think it'll be interesting to see. You've got Tarasenko, Stastny, Steen all played great in the first series, and then obviously the big line for Nashville is Johansson, Forsberg, and Arvidsson, and how well they can play in this series. I think it all comes down to, though, I think Nashville has a slight advantage in the way that their defense plays, especially their top 4 is arguably the best top 4 left in the playoffs or even in the NHL. So I think that gives them a slight advantage, and I think Nashville probably gets this done in 7 games.
Yeah, I'll go so far as to say I think they get it done in 6. I mean, it's just the way that they've been playing. I mean, they've already busted, I think, 99% of the brackets around the whole world. So why not keep it going? But like you said, it could go to game 7 too. And another series that could go to game 7, which I had in my bracket, is the Capitals against the Penguins. I think this one's going to be a battle, Eddie. I mean, you got 2 of arguably the best teams in the East going at it. Both of them, winning their first round series. The Capitals, it took them 6 games to get past Toronto, and So sad for Freddie Anderson, but Toronto's out, so Washington's going to face Pittsburgh, and it's really going to. I think this is going to come down to a battle of offense. It's going to be a battle of goaltenders too. They're not obviously, I think, as on it as Nashville and the Blue Series is going to be. But this one is going to be, I think, entertaining, Eddie, and may see some high scoring affairs in these games. And I think this one could definitely go 7.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting one when you look at it. Most people would say, "Oh, Pittsburgh definitely has an advantage." I mean, they blew by Columbus, and Washington struggled with Toronto, who was arguably one of the worst teams coming in points-wise in the playoffs. But I think you have to give a lot of credit to Toronto and the way they played against Washington in that series. I mean, I don't think anybody expected them to come out and battle the way they did and then take 5 of those games to overtime against the best team in the NHL. And I think Washington coming in is going to be better off for playing a tough series like that against a young team in the Leafs. And you look at the way the Blue Jackets played against Pittsburgh, and they played awful. They didn't play great. Bobrovsky wasn't solid for them. They couldn't get much going other than the game that they won against the Penguins, and even that was a tough 5-4 win where they almost lost it. So I think this will be an interesting series. I mean, I'm giving a slight edge to the Capitals, who are 100% healthy. The Penguins still have no Chris Letang. I'm not sure if Matt Murray is going to be back, even though Fleury did play solid in the first round of the playoffs. But yeah, it will be one of the most exciting rounds of the playoffs. Obviously, there's always bad blood between the Capitals and the Pens with the rivalry between Ovechkin and Crosby, so that'll be interesting to see. And it'll be great to see if Malkin can continue playing the way he's been playing. I mean, 11 points in 5 games through round 1. I mean, he kind of gets sometimes overshadowed by the superstar of Sidney Crosby, but the way he played in round 1, he was a real key piece to their 5-game victory.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I give a slight edge to the Capitals, even though I'm rooting for Pittsburgh in this one. So, with that, the last series is going to be the New York Rangers. They took out Montreal, which may have been a surprise to some people, as New York was a wild card team. But remember, they're in the Metropolitan, the ultra competitive Metropolitan. So they were a wild card. They really weren't in my book. But they're going to go up against Ottawa. Ottawa ended up edging out Boston 4-2 in that series. So this one, I don't know. This one's kind of even to me, Eddie. I don't really have a preference who I think is going to win. Maybe a little bit of an edge to New York, especially after taking out Montreal. I kind of give them the edge in this series. But this is another one to watch. I mean, all these series, any one of these series can go 6 or 7 games. So I think this is going to be another entertaining one, and it could come down to 1 or 2 games in overtime as well.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one that was a little bit more clear-cut than the other 3, I think this would be the series. I don't want to put anything against Ottawa. I think they played great in round 1, but they were playing a really depleted Boston Bruins team on the blue line. They had to call up a lot of young guys they did make key contributions, but it's difficult to have to call up so many young guys who have no experience in the NHL, let alone in the playoffs, and try and win a series. But I think the Rangers are a more complete team. Like you said, they're not really a wild card team the way they played.
Right.
It's just they're playing in that Metropolitan Division where the 3 top teams were just so good during the regular season. But I think they're a deeper team. I think their goaltending with the way Henrik Lundqvist played in round 1 is a lot better. And then other than having Erik Karlsson on the blue line, I think the Rangers are a lot deeper on the blue line. So I think it's gonna be a tough victory for the Sens. They've obviously got home ice going for them, which is due to the fact of the Rangers being a wild card team. But again, the Rangers were one of the best road teams in the playoffs. We saw that when they came to Honda Center. So I think I got to give an edge to the Rangers, and I'd go so as far maybe to say that they win this in 5 games. I think they're just that much of a better team.
So if we look at it, our prediction is the Ducks against Nashville and Washington against New York, Eddie. I mean, that's what we're looking at. If it's the Final Four, obviously it's going to take a week and a half or so to get to that. But that's where we're at. That's our predictions around the league. We'll be back probably sometime in the middle of this series, I would think, Eddie. Obviously, we don't think it's going to end quick against the Oilers, but we'll have another show. And we'll break down, the first 2 or 3 games, depending on how the schedule pans out, for Eddie and I to get back on here and talk. Also, if you haven't seen, we have 3 new shirts up. make sure to check out the website to buy them, tpnhockey.com. We've got up the Manson shirt. We have a Lindholm shirt up there. And we also have the You Can't Win Here shirt, which is obviously pretty popular because of the Calgary Flames' lack of success against the Ducks in Anaheim. So those are on there. Check them out. Thanks for all the fan questions. We'll be back probably within a week. And let's go Ducks.